A heavyweight champion cornered Bruce Lee against the ropes of the ring. What happened in the next 3 seconds was so fast that most of those present had to ask what the hell had just happened. Because when a 210-pound man ends up on the canvas without knowing how he got there, you need an explanation. Seattle, Washington, March 1962. A Tuesday night at the Morrison Boxing Gym, in the basement of a brick building in Pioneer Square. It's not a fancy place. Low ceiling, flickering yellowish lights, the air smells of old sweat and wet leather. 3 practice rings crammed into a space designed for 2. Heavy bags hanging from rusted chains that creak with every hit. The constant sound of gloves against leather, feet dragging on stained canvas, forced breaths, spits into buckets. This is a gym for real boxers. No tourists, no weekend hobbyists. Here train men who fight for money, who step into the ring knowing they might come out with a broken jaw or worse. Professional boxers, semi-professionals, some who have passed their prime but can still teach the young ones how to survive 6 rounds against someone who wants to rip your head off. Bruce Lee pushes open the metal door. 21 years old, still a student at the University of Washington, 140 pounds, black training pants, gray hooded sweatshirt. He carries a small bag over his shoulder. No one knows him here. Seattle has a large Chinese community, but this is an Irish and Italian boxing gym. Asians don't come here, not because it's forbidden, they just don't. Different worlds, different codes. Bruce walks in and the place doesn't stop. No one stops training to look at him. There are maybe 20 guys in the gym, all focused on their work. Bruce walks to the counter where an older man with a nose clearly broken several times is sitting reading the newspaper. His name is Tommy. He was a boxer in the 30s, lost more than he won but survived. Now trains kids and runs the gym. Bruce says he wants to train. Tommy looks at him over the newspaper, sizes him up, asks if he's boxed before. Bruce says he's trained in martial arts. Tommy nods, not impressed but not hostile. Says it costs $2 per session, $10 for the month. Bruce pulls out a $10 bill, puts it on the counter. Tommy pockets it, points to the changing rooms, says there are gloves available if he needs them, that the rules are simple, respect others, clean your sweat, don't act like an idiot. Bruce changes, comes out, finds a free space near a speed bag. He starts warming up. Neck rotations, shoulder circles, hip twists. His warm-up isn't like the boxers. They jump rope, shadow box, movements any boxer recognizes. Bruce does dynamic stretches that look strange here. Some guys glance at him briefly, go back to their work. After 10 minutes, Bruce moves to the heavy bag. He doesn't put on gloves, starts hitting with bare hands. The punches sound different. Not the dull, deep sound of a 16-ounce glove. It's sharper, more penetrating. Bruce hits fast. His fists are blurry. The bag swings with every impact. The speed is remarkable. Even here, where hand speed is common currency, this is different. A boxer near the bag stops, watches. He's young, maybe 19, welterweight, fast with good hands. He tells his training partner to look. Both watch Bruce work the bag. The young boxer says out loud, loud enough for Bruce to hear, he hits fast but no power, pure show. Bruce hears but doesn't respond. He continues his work. After 3 minutes he stops, breathes controlled, wipes the sweat. He moves to an open area, starts practicing kicks, side kicks, spinning kicks, mid-level kicks. In a boxing gym, this is practically an insult. Kicks don't exist here. This is the sweet science, the noble art, the art of hitting with fists, not feet. Now more people look, not with friendly curiosity, with disapproval. One of the trainers, a stocky guy with hands like hams, walks toward Bruce. His name is Eddie. He trained 3 state champions, knows the game. He says, "Hey kid, this is a boxing gym, not a kung fu studio." Bruce stops, turns, says calmly that he's training, not bothering anyone. Eddie says it's fine, but here we respect boxing. If you want to train that stuff, there are other places. Bruce nods, says he respects boxing, that he's just using the available space. Eddie looks at him. Something in Bruce's calm makes him back off. It's not fear, it's recognition that this kid isn't a tourist, isn't someone playing around. Eddie shrugs, says, "Okay, just keep your area clean," walks away. The tension doesn't go away. Bruce can feel it. This isn't his place and everyone knows it. He continues training, ignoring the looks, the whispered conversations. After 40 minutes, as he's finishing up, the gym door opens forcefully. A big man walks in. Very big. His name is Frank Sullivan. Irish, 6 feet 3 inches, 210 pounds of functional muscle and scar tissue. 28 years old, professional heavyweight boxer, record 23-4-1, 18 knockouts. He's not a title contender, probably never will be, but he's dangerous. He can hit, he can take hits, he has real experience against real opponents. He's been on the canvas and gotten up. He's put others on the canvas and seen them not get up. Frank is known in this gym. When he walks in, several guys greet him. He responds with nods, smiles. He has presence, the kind of presence that comes from knowing you can fight, from having proven it over and over. He heads to the changing area, changes, comes out in boxing shorts and a sleeveless shirt that shows thick arms marked with sparring scars. Frank starts wrapping his hands, a ritual he's done 1,000 times. As he does, his gaze sweeps the gym, stops on Bruce. Frank frowns, looks at Tommy, asks who the Chinese guy is. Tommy says he's a new kid, paid his membership, he's training. Frank says, training what? Kung Fu? Some guys laugh. It's not cruel laughter. It's camaraderie laughter. The laughter of men who share the same world and see someone from outside. Frank finishes rapping, puts on sparring gloves, gets in the ring with his training partner. They start working. Frank is good. He moves well for his size. Solid jab, heavy hooks, decent footwork. Not elegant like the best, but effective. He does his job with professional efficiency. Bruce watches from his corner. Not obviously, just occasional glances while stretching. He sees how Frank moves, how he generates power, how he covers distance. He's studying, analyzing. This is what Bruce always does. Absorb information, understand different styles, different bodies. After 3 rounds, Frank gets out of the ring. His training partner looks exhausted. Frank is barely breathing hard. The conditioning of a professional. He takes off his gloves, drinks water, wipes sweat. Looks at Bruce again. This time he walks toward him. Frank stands in front of Bruce, arms crossed. Says, "So you practice Kung Fu?" Bruce says, "I practice Chinese martial arts." Frank nods, says, "That's cute, but this is a boxing gym." Bruce says, "I understand. I'm just training." Frank says, "The problem is what you do isn't real fighting. It's choreography. It's for movies. Boxing is real fighting. Getting in the ring, trading punches with someone who wants to knock you out. That's real." Bruce shows no emotion. Says, "Boxing is effective within its rules." Frank laughs, says, "Rules? On the street there are no rules." Bruce says, "Exactly. That's why I train without the limitations of boxing." Frank gets serious, says, "You think your Kung Fu would save you against a real boxer?" Bruce says, "It's not just Kung Fu, it's understanding of combat." Frank says, "Understanding of combat. Listen to those fancy words." Other guys are watching now. Eddie the trainer approaches, senses the tension rising. Frank says, "How about this, kid? Get in the ring with me. Just light sparring. I'll show you the difference between your little kicks and real punches." Bruce looks at him, assesses. Frank isn't a dumb bully. He's a professional, dangerous. But Bruce also sees the arrogance, the certainty that his world is the only one that matters. Bruce says, "I don't think it's a good idea." Frank smiles, says, "Why? You scared?" Bruce says, "No, because you're trained for boxing. I'm not. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." Frank says, "I thought you said your martial arts were superior." Bruce says, "I didn't say superior. I said different." Frank is enjoying this. Says, "Look, I promise I'll go light, just 50%. I just want to see what you got." Eddie intervenes, says, "Frank, leave him alone. The kid's fine." Frank ignores Eddie, keeps his eyes on Bruce. Says, "Unless you admit boxing is superior and your Kung Fu is just dancing." Bruce feels the trap. If he refuses, he admits inferiority. If he accepts, he risks real injury. Frank is much bigger, much more experienced in the ring, knows that space like his home. But something in Bruce can't let this pass. Not ego, principle. He's seen too much disdain for Chinese martial arts, too many people assuming they don't work against real fighting. Bruce says, "Okay, I'll get in. But no gloves." Frank laughs, says, "No gloves? You want me to break your face?" Bruce says, "No gloves, no boxing rules. You try whatever you want, I try whatever I want." Frank says, "That's not sparring, that's a real fight." Bruce says, "Exactly. You said there are no rules on the street, right? Let's test that." Frank looks at Eddie. Eddie says, "I can't allow that. Someone's going to get hurt." Frank says, "The kid's asking for a lesson." Eddie says, "Not in my gym. Too much liability." Frank thinks, says, "How about outside, in the alley? No rules, no official witnesses. Just us two. These guys watching. Bruce nods. Says, that works for me. Eddie says, you're both crazy. Frank says, nah, I'm just gonna teach the kid a quick lesson, 30 seconds, done. Bruce says nothing, just follows Frank, who's already walking toward the back door. The others follow. Tommy yells that this is stupid. No one listens. The alley behind the gym is narrow, damp, brick walls on both sides, dumpsters in the corners. The ground is cracked asphalt with puddles from the earlier rain. There's enough space, maybe 15 feet wide. The light comes from a single yellow lamp over the back door and the distant glow from the street. 20 men form an irregular circle. Some are excited, others worried. Frank stands in the center, bouncing on his feet, shadowboxing, loosening his shoulders. He looks confident, comfortable. He's been in situations like this before, bar fights, wild sparring. He knows real violence. Bruce stands still, hands at his sides, breathing normally. No ritual, no visible preparation, just waiting. Frank says, sure about this, kid? You can still back out. Bruce says, I'm sure. Frank says, your funeral. Points to a guy, says, you count 3, we start. The guy counts, 1, 2, 3. Frank moves forward immediately, closing distance, wants to corner Bruce against the wall. It's a smart tactic, eliminates Bruce's mobility, turns him into a stationary target. Frank is bigger, heavier, in a confined space that's a huge advantage. Bruce backs up but not fast, allowing Frank to pressure him. In seconds, Bruce's back is 3 feet from the brick wall. Frank smiles. He has him where he wants. Throws a jab, testing. Bruce dodges minimally. Frank throws a combination, jab cross hook. The punches are fast, precise, born of years of repetition. Bruce moves. He doesn't block. He slips. The heads miss by inches. Frank feels the air move, knows he was close. Throws another hook, this one with more power. Bruce ducks under. Frank's fist hits air. Frank is starting to get frustrated. He's throwing real punches now, not 50%, closer to 80. Bruce backs up another step. His back almost touches the wall. Frank sees the opportunity, lunges with everything. A massive right cross aimed straight at Bruce's face, 210 pounds of body weight behind the punch. If it connects, the fight ends. Bruce has no room to back up. He's trapped. Frank knows he has him. The fist travels. In the last microsecond before impact, Bruce does 3 things simultaneously. He slips an inch to his left. Frank's cross goes by, hits the brick behind Bruce with a loud sound that echoes. Frank's hand explodes in pain. While Frank's fist is still extended against the wall, Bruce steps forward. His right foot plants between Frank's feet. His left hand grabs Frank's extended wrist, pulling down and out, unbalancing him. Simultaneously, Bruce's right palm strikes Frank's chest. Not hard, just below the sternum, a precise hit. Frank feels his center of gravity shift. His back foot slips on the wet asphalt. He's falling. His brain doesn't understand how. A second ago he was throwing the winning punch, now he's falling backward. Frank's body hits the ground, flat on his back. His head bounces against the asphalt, not hard but enough to stun him. He looks up at the night sky, confused. Bruce stands over him, calm, not even breathing hard. The alley is in absolute silence. No one moves. 3 seconds. From when Frank threw his cross until he was on the ground, 3 seconds. Most of those present didn't see what happened. It was too fast, too subtle. They saw Frank corner Bruce, saw Frank throw a big punch, then suddenly Frank was on the ground. Eddie approaches quickly, kneels next to Frank, asks if he's okay. Frank nods slowly. His right hand hurts horribly. His knuckles probably fractured from hitting the brick. Eddie helps Frank sit up. Frank looks at Bruce, says, "What the hell was that?" Bruce says, "You used your strength against yourself. You made me look trapped. You expected me to panic. Instead, I used the wall as an anchor, your momentum as leverage. I didn't hit you hard. I just redirected your energy." Frank says, "My hand is wrecked." Bruce says, "The wall did that, not me. You chose to throw with full power without considering what was behind your target." Frank stands up with Eddie's help, holds his injured hand, looks at Bruce with a mix of pain, confusion, and something else, respect slowly emerging. Says, "I never saw anyone move like that." Bruce says, "Because you're trained to see boxing punches, boxing steps, boxing angles. What I do isn't in your visual vocabulary. Your brain can't process it in time." Eddie says, "You need ice on that hand, probably go to the hospital." Frank nods, looks at the group of boxers staring open-mouthed, says, "Anyone see what happened?" No one answers clearly. One says, "You moved toward him, then you were on the ground." Another says, "I think he pushed you?" Another says, "I didn't see any push." Frank looks at Bruce, says, "Can you teach me that?" Bruce says, "I can, but it will take time. You'd have to unlearn a lot of what you know." Frank says, "I thought what I knew was all I needed." Bruce says, "What you know is good for what it does. But combat is bigger than any set of rules. Boxing is part, not all." Frank says, with pain in his voice, "I thought having you against the wall meant I had won." Bruce says, "Being cornered is only bad if you think in 2 dimensions. There was height, there was time, there was your expectation. All that is space I can use." Frank says, "I never thought of fighting like that." Bruce says, "Most people don't. That's why it works." Eddie interrupts, says, "You two can philosophize later. Frank needs medical attention." Several boxers help Frank back into the gym. Bruce follows. Tommy is at the counter, shaking his head, says, "I knew this was a bad idea." Frank sits while Eddie wraps his hand in ice. Several boxers are discussing what they saw, trying to understand. The young welterweight who had commented on Bruce's lack of power is quiet now, rethinking everything. Another boxer asks Bruce directly, "Can you do that again? Or was it luck?" Bruce says it wasn't luck, it was reading his movement, understanding physics, reaction time. Frank threw exactly what I expected because that's what boxers do when they corner someone. Predictable. The boxer says, "But you're smaller." Bruce says, "Size matters when 2 people fight the same way. When we fight differently, other things matter more." Frank says, with his hand in ice, "I'm going to need to see a doctor, probably out 6 weeks. My next fight is in 2 months." Bruce says, "Sorry." Frank says, "No, I asked for it. I thought it was simple. I thought I knew what to expect. I was wrong." Eddie says, "You saw why I don't like this. Someone always gets hurt." Bruce gets ready to leave, picks up his bag. Frank calls him, says, "You said you could teach. For real?" Bruce says, "For real." Frank says, "When my hand heals, I want to learn." Bruce pulls out a piece of paper, writes an address, says, "This is my place. I teach Tuesdays and Thursdays at night. Come when you're ready." Frank takes the paper, looks at it, says, "I thought boxing was the pinnacle. I thought we were the real fighters." Bruce says, "You are real fighters, within a specific set of rules. The problem is thinking those rules are the only ones that matter." Frank nods slowly. 2 months later, Frank shows up at the address Bruce gave. It's a small space above a Chinese restaurant, narrow stairs, smell of incense and food. Frank climbs up, opens the door. Bruce is teaching 3 students, all Chinese. They see Frank come in, tall, white, clearly out of place. Bruce smiles, says, "You came." Frank raises his hand, now healed. Says, 6 weeks in a cast. A lot of time to think. Bruce introduces Frank to the other students, says he's a professional boxer, that he's here to learn. The students look at him with respect, curiosity. Frank feels uncomfortable. He's used to being the expert, the one who teaches. Now he's the newest student in a system he doesn't understand. Bruce doesn't start with complicated techniques. He starts with concepts, talks about lines of attack, about creating and exploiting angles, about not marrying any specific style. Says, boxing taught you valuable things, hand speed, footwork, endurance, how to take a punch. But it also taught you limitations. No kicks, no grabs, no strikes from unconventional angles. You need to keep the good, add more tools. Frank trains with humility. It's hard for him. His entire identity is built on being a boxer, on being tough, on solving problems with his fists. Now he's learning there are problems his fists can't solve, not in the way he's trained to use them. The months pass. Frank transforms. He doesn't stop being a boxer, but he becomes something more. He integrates low kicks to destroy bases, grabs to control distance, palm and elbow strikes for close range. His boxing improves too, because now he understands that rules are artificial, that real fighting is more fluid. One day, Bruce tells Frank something important. Says, "When we faced off in that alley, I didn't beat you because I'm a better person or stronger. I beat you because I understood the context better than you. You thought it was a boxing fight without gloves. I knew it was something different. Knowledge won, not strength." Frank says, "You changed me. I thought I had it all figured out." Bruce says, Most people live their whole lives thinking they have it all figured out. You were lucky. You learned at 28. Some never learn. Frank continues boxing professionally, but he fights differently now. His footwork is more varied, his distance more dynamic, his angles less predictable. Other boxers comment that he changed. Frank doesn't fully explain, just says he expanded his training. He wins his next 4 fights. His record improves. When Bruce eventually moves from Seattle, Frank keeps in touch. Years later, when Bruce becomes famous, Frank tells the story of the alley. Not with shame, with gratitude, says, "That little guy knocked me out without really hitting me. He taught me that everything I thought I knew was just a fraction of what was possible." The story spreads among boxers. Some dismiss it, say it's impossible, that it's exaggeration. Others, especially those who know Frank, know it's true. Frank isn't a liar, isn't someone who admits defeat easily. If he says it happened, it happened. Those 3 seconds in the alley changed Frank's trajectory. Before that, he was on a set path, knew exactly who he was, what he could do, what his limits were. After, everything was in question, everything was open. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. This is what 3 seconds can do, not just change the outcome of a confrontation, change the way someone sees the entire world. Frank lived 28 years thinking boxing was the answer. 3 seconds showed him he didn't even know the full question. How many times do we assume our way is the only one? That our way of doing things is the right one? That smaller, different people can't teach us anything? Frank learned the opposite. And that lesson was worth every second of pain, confusion, and rebuilding that followed. Because in the end, it's not about who wins a fight in an alley. It's about who is willing to admit they don't know everything. Who is willing to learn even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Frank had 3 seconds. It was enough.